The good news is we are becoming much more prevalent in the film world as we are in the real world. The bad news is when you have this visibility, you suddenly can become a target. Hi, this is Mike Balaban. Welcome to another episode of BAMMER Talks. Today I'd like to cover a pretty extensive topic, and that's the notion of LGBTQ or queer representation in mainstream media and how that has evolved over the last 50 to 60 years. Back in the dark ages of the American movie industry, there was something called the Hays Code, the movie production code, that didn't allow anything too sexy, anything that had any involvement with the LGBTQ world. Nothing was allowed of any consequence, and it kept the movies pretty bland. But in 1961, the code was relaxed a little bit, and movies started to take shape that were different. So, for example, there was a movie called The Children's Hour with Audrey Hepburn and Shirley MacLaine playing two closeted lesbians. And of course, it had to be inferred and insinuated. Nothing could be too open, but you got the message. And this, of course, was mirroring the changes in society that were beginning to take place, whereas the post-World War II conservative Eisenhower era of the 50s gave way to the flower power, black power, sexual revolution, and Stonewall era of the 1960s and early 70s, which allowed for an experimentation in all things, including media. And so we began to see somewhat more adventurous film, albeit still very carefully nibbling around the edges of discussing homosexuality openly and including, characters in main roles who never were heroes. They were always victims or bad guys or girls. So in the 60s and 70s, in any movie in which an LGBTQ person appeared or seemed to appear, they had to die by the end of the movie or end up in prison or some unhappy end happened to them. It was kind of the moral of the story. But at least we were seeing ourselves increasingly in media. And then we got into an era of the 70s, pre-AIDS, when movies began to come out, and certainly some porn movies like Boys in the Sand that involved more explicit gay roles in them. And you began to be able to find little bits of entertainment publicly available if you looked for it. And then finally around 1980 is when things began to open. Making Love in 1980, which had a kiss between two men for the first time in it. And the audience where I was, and I heard where other gay men attended, booed. Particularly the men in the audience booed when there was a kiss between two men because it threatened their, sense of security. But that had kind of opened the floodgates. In 1986, we had Parting Glances, a movie which launched the career of a straight movie actor, Steve Buscemi. And it was the first movie that I saw where I recognized myself on screen. It was two Upper West Side Manhattan, normal, masculine, unaffected gay men in a relationship living together, and what happened to drive them apart, and what happened when Steve Buscemi, the character who played the best friend of one of the guys, ended up coming down with AIDS. It was just joyful to me to see myself in the movie in a role that I recognized because that's how I lived, and AIDS was taking over my life in Manhattan in the 1980s. So around that time, film festivals began to be established in the major U.S. and European and Canadian cities that devoted themselves to LGBTQ film. In New York, New Fest was created in 1988. I happen to be on its board and have been for the last 10 years, and I've been attending movies since the first year was in existence. And I've watched as the menu and the selection of movies available to us has just mushroomed. As you might expect, in the 1970s and 80s, and even in the 90s, films were primarily by and about gay men, mostly gay white men, to be honest. In the power structure, we're the ones who are in positions of authority, often closeted, sometimes not, making good amounts of money, and therefore had influence enough to either try to get Hollywood to make a movie that had a plot involving us, or at the very least to help raise money and fund movies that were made independently about the gay community. A lesser amount of those movies were about lesbians, but still we together constituted pretty much 100% of what was available. Now, around the turn of the century, as society began to open up, as the number of identities available to us mushroomed from lesbian and gay and maybe bisexual to LGBT, transgender, and queer and gender non-binary, and then all of the other hidden, if you will, sectors of our subculture that were never getting attention, never saw themselves on screen, began to be given an opportunity. They began to be able to raise money to make films, small budgeted films about themselves that then got distribution and are now shown all over the country and the world. And they might be by a Native American filmmaker, Native American queer filmmaker, or a trans filmmaker, or an intersex filmmaker, or certainly by more and more people of color. But the result was, whereas we were 100% of the movies, gay men and lesbians, that represented our community in, let's say, 1990, now when you get to 2010 to 2024, increasingly at these film festivals, you're seeing opportunities for films by lesser known segments of our community to be able to see themselves appear on screen and to make movies and show them everywhere, so that we are everywhere, and our representation is expanded. It's an exciting era, and the width and breadth of our reach is so much more than it was. However, to be quite transparently honest, as a gay white man who used to be able to see 75% of all the movies that represented our community about me, and now when I go look at 125 films each year at NewFest, I might find 5 or 10 that are primarily about gay men or gay white men. And, we all tend to hang around with people mostly like ourselves, although the younger people, thank God, are getting more diverse in their friendships. And so we tend to look at entertainment and read books and other forms of entertainment about ourselves. Not that I don't enjoy movies about lesbians and trans and whatever. Every year I prepare a 2-page primer for the people who are my friends who might be logging into NewFest or attending it, and I give them 15 to 20 recommended movies that I'm really looking forward to seeing. And I will make sure that probably 10 of those 15 or 20 are about gay men, and another 3 or 4 about lesbian, and 2 or 3 are about trans, and others are about foreign filmmakers in other countries, different parts of the world. And the result being that I try to show an audience a wide selection. I go and see some of those films myself. I really enjoy them, but deep inside, I kind of long for the days where I got to see more of me up on the screen. And that's just the way it is. Everybody should be aware of it. The good news is we are becoming much more prevalent in the film world as we are in the real world. The bad news is when you have this visibility, you suddenly can become a target. And now that the right wing is sort of resurgent in this Trumpian era of anti-woke, anti-LGBTQ, white supremacist forces, they can direct a lot of their ire towards us because we're now more visible out in the world. Where this is going to end up, no one knows. Let's hope that we prevail and continue to see the expansiveness of our representation on screen. Now, if you have any interest, I have a document, several pages long, that lists maybe the top 10 or so movies and top 10 or so streaming series in the last 20, 25 years in terms of LGBTQ entertainment that a group of admittedly gay men all focused on. So there's probably more of it going to be gay male oriented. But if you're looking for some entertainment that you may have missed or it may have escaped you, I'd be happy to provide you with that list if you just email me at BAMMER47@gmail.com. Again, this is Mike Balaban talking about mainstream representation of the LGBTQ community and how it's changed over 50 years. Let me know your thoughts. I look forward to hearing from you. Another episode of BAMMER Talks. Bye-bye.